Okay, welcome everyone. I'm Ann Balsamo. I serve as the Dean of the School of Media Studies here at the New School. And I'm really delighted to have an opportunity to welcome you tonight to this event, which is a follow-up to a symposium that we sponsored last February on Indigenous new media. That event brought together some of the leading Native American and First Nation media makers to discuss how new media platforms are being used in the Indigenous communities to educate, entertain, organize, advocate, and activate. We are also grateful to Clayton Thomas Mueller of Idle No More, who approached us about hosting this event during Climate Week here at the New School, and we are proud and happy to do that. We're honored to continue this important dialogue, which brings together a remarkable panel of esteemed women activists and organizers from Native American and First Native communities in the United States and Canada. Before I leave the stage, though, I'd like to say a special thank you to Julia Walsh, founder and campaign director of Frack Action. Frack Action is co-sponsoring the event this afternoon, so thank you very much, Julia. She'll be moderating our panel following presentations by our speakers. Special thank you also to Dean Michelle DePass, my colleague, who's the dean of the school, the Milano School, Anna Baptista, and the organizers of Climate Action Week here at the New School. A special thanks to Jessica Harjo for our graphic design, to the Media Studies faculty member Vinay Kadre for producing our live stream tonight, to New School staff Pam Tillis, Tracy Verides, Janelle McKenzie, Larice Morgan-Eddy for their help all month in getting this event organized. And then to Rosalie McManus, Preet Panu, and Red Dog Productions for videotaping and documenting tonight. This will be up in our website by the end of the week. Now it is my pleasure to welcome Chief Dwayne Perry of the Ramapow Lenape Nation, who will offer a welcome message and greeting. Thank you.
Ngikiai benmi boku makwa Lenape Monse. I'm Chief Perry of the Ramapow Lenape. Little background is this is our ancestral homeland, Manhattan. We're Munsee people. It's a band of the Lenape people. We're a Ramapow people. That is the Sweetwater clan of the Munsees. A little background history is that we were instrumental in creating this union that we are calling America. In the essence of the Revolutionary War, when George Washington was a captain and Alexander Hamilton was a lieutenant working in the Ramapow Pass, it was my ancestors that showed them where the iron was. And in the end, we were able to provide them with the first 900 cannonballs in the American Revolution, the chain that goes across the Hudson, the iron in the dome of the Capitol building, the woman, the Lady of Freedom atop the building, and to this moment, this government doesn't know who we are. So, a little bit about, I just want to make another comment before I offer this prayer. I want to give a very, very special thanks to all of you women. Some of you who know me know I've been saying for almost 20 years, the women are without question the leaders of our entire universe, the mothers of our life. So I'm highly honored that I could even be here for a moment with all of you. Thank you. And so a prayer. Wanabaju, Gichila Mokwine, Benmi Boku Makwa, Nianishi, Alamiliang, Kwaikan Kishkwik. Nokomis Mishkomis, we ask in a good way that you have mercy and pity upon all of us, that you look upon the Membi, the water, that it may be made sweet and pure from the bottom of the ocean to the sky. We ask that the grandmas and the grandpas of the wind have mercy and pity upon us, that the air that we breathe may be made whole and pure, that all may live. We ask Grandma and Grandpa that you look over us upon this Turtle Island, that we may stop gouging and digging and poisoning and harming and killing our grandmother, the earth, the one that holds us in her bosom and keeps our life before her. We ask that each and one of us find good balance and good judgment, find a beauty way with culture and understanding, that we may continue to lift each other up and to heal our grandma. Inishi, 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 Ilungu Matita. Oh, thank you. Because Indians are really slow sometimes, I'd like to thank Julia from Frack Action, and Julia, please. Thank you, darling.
All right. Hello, everyone. And thank you, Chief Perry, for welcoming us here on the ancestral homeland of the Lenape people. Thank you to our panel of powerful women. It is an honor to be here with you and to learn about the campaigns you are leading to stop fracking and defend our Mother Earth. Thank you to the New School for hosting us and the two women who made this event possible, Dean Ann Balsamo from the School of Media Studies and Dean Michelle DePass at the Milano School of International Affairs, Management, and Urban Policy. Thanks also to GRIST, one of the sponsors of Climate Action Week here at the New School. And thank you to the team at Idle No More for co-organizing this event. Frack Off, Indigenous women leading media campaigns to defend our climate. My name is Julia Walsh, and I'm the founder and campaign director of Frack Action, a statewide organization that is working to win a ban on fracking in New York. We started up as a grassroots organization when fracking was about to begin and helped to pass a statewide moratorium. And over the past 4 years, I'm proud to say that our movement in New York has continued to hold off fracking with a lot of love, dedication, and a little bit of New York attitude. Our frontline communities remain unfractured because of the power of organizing. This event came together when a group of us here at the New School's program last spring called Indigenous New Media Symposium met up and talked. We knew that it was really important to organize an event during the People's Climate March to hear from Indigenous women leaders in order to build awareness, solidarity, and support for their work. We knew it was important to organize a women's event because women are the creators of life, and we cannot have life on Earth without clean water. Extreme energy like fracking and tar sands threatens our water, our lives, and our climate. In order to restore balance on the planet, the women must be honored and respected. So we are here tonight to listen and learn from these women. Women are leading our movement. That's right. Fracking is I'll talk a little bit about just fracking and what it is for those who don't know. Fracking is an inherently dangerous and destructive process. Swaths of land are cleared, then wells are drilled up to miles down and then out horizontally. Next, millions of gallons of our precious fresh water are mixed with tens of thousands of gallons of some of the most toxic chemicals on Earth and sand, and then blasted at extreme high pressure underground to violently break apart shale bedrock underground. And then each well becomes a toxic smokestack in the earth, like a giant cigarette outfitted with 60-foot-high flares and hundreds of chemicals polluting the air, water, people, and all living things around it. We also organized this event because we knew how important it was to network and build our growing anti-fracking movement before the United Nations Climate Summit. We are concerned on Tuesday that when our world leaders meet at the UN, some may be promoting fracking as a climate solution, including President Barack Obama. It is critical that everyone in the climate justice movement know that the process of fracking and fracked gas are major contributors to climate change. The science that fracking will exacerbate climate change because drilling and fracking operations leak a great deal of methane, which is a particularly potent form of carbon, 86 times more potent than carbon dioxide in a critical short time period. Indeed, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has called for the reduction of methane emissions to be priority number 1. The tragic irony of all of this is that by fracking, we are speeding up the climate catastrophe instead of building the renewable energy infrastructure and economy that is the real solution and is available right now. Unfortunately, many environmental organizations and elected officials still have not taken this inconvenient scientific truth to heart. Finally, I want to say just a few words about the image that we chose for this event. We decided to use this image because it represents the power of our movement and the power of social media to raise awareness and create change. This image was originally a photograph of a woman from Elsipogtog in Canada. She and her community were stopping a Houston-based fracking company from coming on their land to conduct seismic testing. In this picture, she is kneeling and praying with the eagle feather while being surrounded by 300 armed police. This photo literally went viral online and is one of the most recognizable images to people in our movement around the world. And we are happy to have Shelley Young here today as one of our speakers who can tell us more about this image and situation. This is the power of social media, one of the most powerful ways in which we can create change and connect. Now I would like to invite our speakers up on stage, Ellen Gabriel, Ellie Maya Tailfeathers, Candy Mossett, and Shelley Young. Thank you so much. And first we have Ellen Gabriel.
Wat kun uradu sa kwego yauni ne kwego unkane wa hadio tanagi na hoti onyo jera na yikwat kanisa argi sa wani sarade hanto kadaso wa katunzone ji detin uradu na sungwa titu tanu yete ista unzage ji kwego no hota adun hatsun kiawis kati tsakwas na yujat tanu wa ganyahtu kanya kahaga gyanto tanu Kanehsatà gena kanagere. I want to thank the organizers for putting this together and is the reason why we are all gathered here today. I also want to greet the Creator and greet Mother Earth for all the life that they give us and help us to survive on this earth. So one of the things, I guess I missed that slide. One of the things that the Iroquois people do is acknowledge all of creation. We call it ahantukariwatekwa, the words that are said before all else. And it's a consensus-building kind of prayer, where at the end, after all the words of we are acknowledging all our relations, from the waters, the fish, the medicines, the green plants, to the trees and the birds, that we understand that they are important to our survival. And at the end, we ask, are we all of one mind? So I'm going to ask you, Yes. So, skana sa watunyus, na zinahota ge wana sunota ge targi, so inserate. So I ask you to be of peaceful minds when you listen to the words that I'm going to say today. Okay, so this is what's on the screen. So I want to start off with a quote from the late John Mohawk about colonization, because this is what Indigenous peoples throughout the world have been experiencing. And a survival. We're learning to survive on a daily basis, even today. People think, and you know, the Prime Minister of Canada thinks that colonization is over. In fact, he's even said that colonization never happened in Canada. So it's another lie that he's been told, he's been telling the world. But colonization continues today in Canada in various forms and policies in Canada to assimilate us, to threaten our languages, our culture. And one of the things that they base all this justification for oppression, and in fact for genocide, comes from centuries-old doctrines of discovery. And you know, US and Canadian property laws are also based on these legal fictions. So it's an excuse to justify the theft of our lands. It's an excuse to oppress people, and it's been an excuse to kill our people. And so when we talk about justice and climate and Mother Earth, we need to talk about those teachings of our ancestors that are just as relevant today as they were yesterday. Those teachings were designed to evolve and bring us strength, hope, and love. And why? And it's because for future generations, we are supposed to be thinking about the children. That's what we should be telling the UN member states. That's what you should be telling your president of the United States. He has 2 daughters. What about their future? We cannot go live on Mars. We cannot get water and import water from the moon. It has to be here and today. And one of the things that the UN member states forget to think about is the rights of the children and the rights of human beings. And the fact that we cannot live without water, we cannot live without air, we cannot live without love, we cannot live without peace. Because without those essential elements of life, our lives don't mean that much. In fact, our lives are over. And when we talk about climate justice, when we talk about those things that are essential to human life, and when we ask these corporations to stand aside, and when the people decide that it's time to take back their democracy from the corporate-controlled governments and the corporations, when the people decide that, you've got to get up off your seats. You've got to get up and tell your friends. You've got to get up and bring that into schools of your children, about what's been going on to Indigenous peoples, because if they had respected our lives as human beings from the beginning, since contact, we would not be in this terrible mess today where the lives of future generations are in peril because of what we are doing to the climate and to the earth today. So I just want to quote one of the judges in Canada, when we have no business figuring out the cost of justice until we can figure out the real cost of justice. And one of the things that I think is really important that people forget about is that they don't even consider justice on a daily basis, as long as it doesn't affect them. As long as they're not like they can go to the store and buy whatever, they're fine. But the second we're in justice, you know, we're in these states of trauma, we're in these states of crisis, people seem to get together. And what people haven't realized is that we are in a crisis. On a daily basis, we are in a crisis. We are making the kinds of decisions that we have no right to, because we are supposed to be here to protect future generations. If we care about life, if we care about the human species existing, because Mother Earth will exist long after we're extinct. But if we care about our species existing, then we need to become educated on every aspect of our lives, not just what corporate law is, not just what economics is. And you know, Obama and Stephen Harper have both said their priorities, their two priorities are economics and job security. And job security, why? Because they want to get elected the next time around, and it's not because they care. And one of the big things that's happening this week is at the United Nations, there's the World Conference on Indigenous Peoples. It's another level of colonialism for Indigenous peoples. And while we're very, very happy that we have our foot in the door, because one of the great Iroquois chiefs, Kanien'kehá, went to Geneva in the 1920s, and he asked for the Iroquois people to become part of the League of Nations because we have never surrendered our sovereignty. We never gave up that right. In fact, we have been struggling. As that young woman from Elsipogtog has, you know, with her feather in the air, that has been the symbol, that's really the symbol of Indigenous peoples. Because while we have been fighting your governments, we've been asking you to stand beside us, not in front of us, not speak for us, but beside us in this struggle against authoritarian governments, against corporations who are abusing the planet. And in Canada, you know, one of the things that we see happening is corporations have more rights to water than a hospital. They have more rights to water than an individual. And I know France and some other countries and people like Stephen Harper and I guess here in the US have privatized water. One of the most essential things that is part of our life. And we cannot exist without water after 3 days. And yet this is what they're doing when they're fracking. This is what they're doing when they take away our right to speak. And so those of you who know a little bit, those of you who are not educated about Indigenous peoples' history in the Americas, do so. Because a genocide happened here. A genocide against children. And again, we're going to go back to this theme of children because this is what we need to remember when we're talking about it. Children were forcibly taken from their homes. They were punished for speaking their languages. And I have stories from people from my community. And they had needles put in their tongues. Their hands were held over a hot flame when they spoke their languages. And so what we have today is the threat. And in Canada, the threat to Indigenous language is the highest of all the world, in the most developed countries, in one of the most developed countries in the world. So I think we'll skip because I don't know where the person who's got the time, 3 minutes or whatever. I don't know how much time we have. But this is a young girl from my community. And who here has read the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples? Okay, so not all of you. Most of you haven't. So please take a look on the UN website and read the declaration because it talks about the dispossession that's continuing today. And it talks about it's the framework for reconciliation, and I know some people don't like that word. I don't care. It's not our language. But reconciliation in some way where we can take back control, our right to self-determination. Not because Canada or the US says we have that right. We've always had that right. We've always maintained that right. And we're telling you here today that that right means the survival of us into the next century, the survival of our species according to the teachings of our ancestors, where we respect all life, that we understand that we are part of the environment. We are not above it. We are part of that environment. And you know, it's really difficult in New York City, and I don't want to offend Chief Perry for this, but one of the things that's really important, when we have our moccasins on, you know, when the women have the moccasins, and Iroquois people, we shuffle. The women shuffle, so we get that energy from the earth. And I was trying to get that energy when I was walking around outside, and it was a little bit difficult. But I think your energy is helping me to speak. So Kanehsatà is the oldest Kanien'kehá community, people of the Flint, and it's located near Montreal. And we have Line 9B, we have TransCanada, Energy East, we have had a uranium mine that was, you know, all of a sudden in 1980 when it was closed, the company, the St. Lawrence Columbian Corporation, all of a sudden they went bankrupt. So they left diesel there, and now we have another company where the board is predominantly from China, trying to open up another mine in the very close proximity. It's a niobium. And niobium is used to strengthen steel, for tanks. Because, hey, what would the economy be without war? What would the economy be without regenerating that kind of industry? So I feel like I'm talking too fast. Am I talking too fast? Okay. Okay. Oh, that's the time. Cool. I have the time here. Okay. And I am one of many generations that have fought the colonizers, and they've been trying to get rid of the Kanien'kehá people in my territory. We're 62 kilometers northwest of Montreal, and in 1990, we stood up against a paramilitary force on July 11th in 1990, and we had a 78-day siege in my community. And I notice whether they're talking about Palestinians, whether they're talking about any kind of group that opposes corporate interests, it's the same language. There's a manual, like these are rebels or these are terrorists that took over the community and they have no right. And, we want to talk to the moderates, the civilized Indians, not the savage Indians who are still practicing their ancestral teachings. So we've always resisted the colonizers. And one of the things that's really interesting, I find, with TransCanada especially, because they've come into my community and they have told us, I attended a meeting where they're using our own people. Ishkanogan is sort of the middleman for TransCanada with Aboriginal communities, and they're doing these consultations, these so-called consultations, where they're saying, this is going to be happening anyway, so you may as well benefit from it. And, help us help you by giving us your traditional knowledge. And, you can pick and choose what part of your traditional knowledge you're not going to use to be made public. And I think I want to skip to this one, yeah. So this is one of the things on this outcome document that states have for the World Conference on Indigenous People being objecting to the free, prior, and informed consent of Indigenous peoples when it comes to resource extraction. And resource extraction, of course, is killing the planet. And we're helping it along. Every single one of us is not, everyone here is guilty of that, because we are using petroleum products on a daily basis. And so it's time to come up with some other ideas besides wind energy. And it's time to change the way our lifestyles are. Because if we do not change that, if we don't change that, and it's people I heard yesterday in the opening of the Justice Climate Conference last night, they talked about changing the system. It's not just changing the system. It's changing the way we think. It's changing the way we live as a people, and there should be a distribution of wealth. There should be nobody who's richer than the other person. And I'm not talking about socialism. I don't want to talk about communism. I'm not any of those things. I'm for equality of everybody. Because, remember when the tobacco companies had to pay some I don't know if they did in the US, but they had to pay for health care, right? Because of the lung cancer. Well, why aren't the oil corporations, especially the ones who are in the tar sands, paying for the health care systems of everybody around the world, for all the asthma, for all the asthma and the cancers, the people who are living right around the tar sands, they're getting cancers that are normally seen by people who are overexposed to petroleum products. So I have like 15 seconds left. I want to get to something. Keep going. Yeah. I want to get to our stolen sisters and the reason why it's important that women be recognized, and not just token recognition. We want real recognition to bring back the power and the authority of Indigenous women in our rights to make decisions on our lands and territories, rights to make decisions about our language, culture, and education, and right to be part of discussing what are the solutions with the powers that be. Because Indigenous women were the targets of the Indian Act because they knew that the power rested with the women. And right now, it's a man's world. And in fact, it's a rape culture because in Canada, rape of Indigenous women has gone on with impunity. And the government of Canada refuses to have a national plan of action. They refuse to have an inquiry because it profits them to continue to oppress Indigenous people, and the best way to do it is by the life giver themselves, the women, and it ruptures the family unit, and it's another form of genocide as far as I'm concerned. So all the people who believe that this is just a domestic problem, please educate yourselves. Because the issue of murdered and missing Indigenous women in Canada and the US is because of colonization. It's deeply rooted in colonization. That's it for me. Okay. So sorry, I'm Mohawk, so we like to talk a lot, and so I really appreciate the opportunity to speak here tonight, and I look forward to hearing the other women speakers here. And I just want to say, you know, we're talking about things, and we're in dire crisis. We were in dire crisis generations ago. But we need to bring back the hope for our youth and for our children, because they deserve better than what they're getting right now. They deserve the ultimate effort from every single person in this room and every single person who is listening out there in the broadcast. And to the UN member states who are going to be discussing the rights of Indigenous people and the rights and climate change, become a human being, take a look at what is precious in this world, and bring yourself down and with the average person, because life is precious. All life is precious, and every single day that we wake up and we're alive again, we should be thankful for. We should be thankful to Kanehsatà, that's the Mother Earth, and we should be thankful to all the life givers that we have, whether they're male or female. And thank you for listening to me, and thank you for inviting me. Tony Gawanake to.
Thank you. Next we have Ellie Maya Tailfeathers from the Blood Indian tribe.
Wariakit, wordsvaha. Ja, wariakit pohkadi. Mun on mulle ellemäjä appiniskim tailfeathers. Mun on Kanawas, tai blood reservahtas ja saamis. Ja mun agun ollut kihtu, tiin pohkadi. Ja kihtu Ramapow Lenape olumutimai. Hello, my name's Ellemäjä appiniskim tailfeathers. You can just call me Maya. I come from Kainai, or the Blood Reserve in Alberta, and I'm also Sami from Norway. And I want to offer my thanks to the Ramapow Lenape people for hosting us tonight on their traditional ancestral territory. So I'm not an environmentalist, and that's because I'm a proud Blackfoot and Sami woman who is fighting an Indigenous struggle which is inherently tied to struggles for the land. And that struggle for the land is gendered too. I live in a country where the state thinks that me and every other one of my Indigenous sisters is better off dead. And that's why I'm not an environmentalist. So I'm going to tell you a story that I've told many times before. It's not a very unique story. It's actually a story I've heard many times before, too. And that's because if you just change a few of the details, it's the same story that so many other Indigenous peoples across Turtle Island and across this world can tell themselves. And if there's anything I've learned about stories, is that they can teach us something. But it's not until you find yourself under the said circumstances of that story and trying to figure out what the hell to do when you're in those said circumstances that you actually understand the meaning behind that story. So I'm going to tell you this story I've told many times before, and then I'm going to get to the part about what I learned from this story, about maybe the things I did wrong, the things I could have done better, the things our community could have done better. Because fracking is happening on the Blood Reserve right now, and it's going to happen for the next couple years at least. So I've lived in the traditional, ancestral, unceded territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish people, otherwise known as Vancouver, British Columbia, for 10 years now. I went to the University of British Columbia. I studied First Nation Studies, and I did a minor in Women's and Gender Studies. And I considered myself a politically and socially conscious individual. You know, I read Taiga Alfred and Andrea Smith and Bell Hooks and Frantz Fanon. But the truth is, I didn't know the first thing about being on a front-line struggle for the land. I didn't know jack shit about that at all. And you never really know until you find yourself in the middle of that story. So what I'm sharing with you tonight is any sort of teaching I can offer to anybody that's at the beginning of that story. Because it's happening right now everywhere. So as I said, I come from the Blood Reserve. It's the largest reserve in Canada. It spans over 800 square kilometers. We have over 11,000 plus members of our tribe, half of which live off reserve. And it's the kind of place that brings you inward. The sky is endless. It's the kind of place that makes you think. It's the kind of place that makes you feel. And it's the kind of place that makes you grateful to be alive. And in the fall of in the fall of 2010, I have a deep love for this place, and this story is hard to tell. In the fall of 2010, our chief and council signed a major gas and oil deal, signing over more than half of our land to gas and oil companies for something called hydraulic fracturing, or fracking. And they did so without consulting any of the 11,000 plus members of our tribe. This is what we do it for, right? Thank you. And at the time, I was in my last year of university at UBC, and I didn't know what fracking was. I was like, what the hell is this thing called fracking, you know? It was at a time when everyone was still learning. And so I found out about this deal that our chief and council signed through reading a little tiny Calgary business magazine article online that someone had shared on social media. So I started investigating, and when I did my research and I found out what fracking was, I went into this utter state of panic. I was like, what the hell? Like, they want to pump what into the earth, into our homeland? Who in their right mind would willingly do that? Well, our own chief and council. And that's the same chief and council that went on to make Stephen Harper an honorary member of our tribe. So I think that's enough said. So anyway, as I mentioned, over 50% of our tribal members live off reserve, and of those that live on reserve, the unemployment rate is over 50%. And the first thing that chief and council did once news of this deal broke was they handed out distribution checks to every member of the tribe. These distribution checks were handed out 10 days before Christmas for $800, and I don't know too many people who would turn down $800 10 days before Christmas, especially if you're broke, if you're a single mom living on social assistance. I should also mention that this deal also entailed a $50 million signing bonus. Again, our people had no say in what happened with that money. We don't know where it went. So what happened after this was that those of us who started to research what this whole fracking thing was, we started to reach out to each other through social media. We found each other on Facebook. Indians love Facebook. And we started to try and organize. It was a really small group. It consisted of about a handful of members of our nation and then a handful of non-Blackfoot white people from surrounding communities, largely who were representatives of the Council of Canadians. And we did everything we could. We wrote letters to every level of government. We created petitions. We tried to hold community teach-ins. We tried to contact chief and council. We contacted the gas and oil companies. Everything was done to try and stop that first well from being built. And this all lasted for about 9 months. And as I mentioned, during this time I was in my last year of school at UBC. And so I did all I could to participate from Vancouver. I started a website that had a whole ton of information about fracking and this particular deal that our chief and council had signed. And then I also decided I would make a film. I'd never really made a film before. So I made this experimental film called Bloodland. And I took that first distribution check and I used it to fund the film. I paid a fully Indigenous cast and crew. I rented gear with that money, and I also fed my crew. And then I credited chief and council and the gas and oil companies for funding the film. Credit should always be paid where it's due. So I guess we could screen the film. It's just going to screen on silent behind me. Heads up, it's pretty gory, but I mean, if you're here listening to Indigenous women talk about struggles for the land, then you better be prepared to deal with this kind of stuff, because this is just child's play compared to the systemic violence that Indigenous people face every day of our lives. Just checking my time here. Okay, good. I still got like 5 minutes. So I don't know. Whoever's running the AV thing, do I just hit play here? Oh, okay. Where? Oh, here. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so it's just going to screen behind me while I talk. It's an experimental film. Yeah, you can watch it online later with sound. So now I'm going to take you to September 2011. We're actually almost 3 years to the day for when this happened. So I happened to be home visiting my family, and one morning my mom wakes me up and she says, "Lois and some people, they're having a demonstration down at that first well site." And I was like, "Oh shit, I better go." So my brother and our friend and I went to the well site. And we showed up, and the protest actually consisted of 2 women, Lois Frank and Kathy Brewer, and they were holding up a couple signs that said, "No fracking on bloodland." And so we decided to stay, and we decided that we demand that the chief put a halt to fracking until our tribal members had been properly consulted and until we'd actually made the decision as a nation. And until then, we'd block access to the site. That also meant not letting the people on the site off. So throughout the day, maybe 16 others came and went. It was a peaceful demonstration. We even fed the security guard dinner. There were children and elders there. And anyway, when I got to the site, one of the first things that we did was Lois called Tom Goldtooth with the IEN. And she hands the phone to me, and then Tom says, all right, you got to make some videos and you got to put them on YouTube. And this was before everybody had a smartphone or an iPhone, and I'd never uploaded anything to YouTube before. And so luckily my friend had just bought an iPhone, and we kind of awkwardly figured out how to do this. And we put some videos up of just what was happening down at the site. And before we knew it, the media kind of started to bite, and the police showed up, tribal police and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. The tribal police were actually in direct contact with Chief Charlie Weaselhead, and he said he just didn't have time to come down and talk to us. So we stayed until it got dark, and then we were given an ultimatum: either just give up your protest, or you can carry on your protest in the ditch in the dark, but stop this blockade thing, or get arrested. And that's when I heard Lois say, well, I'm not going anywhere. So I realized in that moment that I wasn't going anywhere either. I wasn't about to see this elder go to jail on her own. And that's also when Jill Crop-Eared Wolf decided she would stand with us. So we were arrested by tribal police and thrown in a tribal holding cell for 10 hours. The holding cell was this concrete room with a steel door and a steel toilet with a camera pointed at it, and there was no toilet paper, and there was another woman in there who'd been thrown in the drunk tank. So it was a really interesting night. And then they released us in the morning, and I was nowhere near prepared for sort of the media onslaught that happened after that. It was 2 weeks of constant media interviews. I had never spoken to the media before. I didn't know that you didn't even have to do interviews if you didn't want to. And I wasn't prepared for the amount of misrepresentation in the media. The court process lasted about 6 months. We were charged with intimidation under the Canadian Criminal Code, and the judge agreed to clear all charges if we took an alternative measures program. So I was given a probation officer, and I went to the probation officer, and she said, I don't really know why you're here, because what you did was an act of community service. So she wrote a letter, and then... So she wrote a letter, and all the charges were cleared. It was over, just like that. The only thing was I wasn't allowed to step near a well site for a couple of years. And after that year, I fell into a really deep depression. I couldn't sleep at night. I had anxiety attacks thinking about what was happening to the land and water, knowing that there were well sites literally 2 kilometers from my grandparents' home. I got angry really fast, and I felt alienated from myself and my community, and that day basically left me questioning everything I knew. I mean, how is it that 3 unarmed women from our tribe were arrested by tribal police for protecting the land, the one thing that is most sacred to us? So 3 years later, almost to the day, as I mentioned, I finally understand why that experience left me feeling so dark afterwards. And it's because what happened was an act of lateral violence, it was an act of gendered violence, and it was an act of systemic colonial violence. The chief and council agreeing to sign away over half of our land for this destructive, awful form of gas and oil extraction was an act of lateral violence. The male police officers arresting 3 women and throwing us into jail, that was an act of gendered violence. The gas and oil companies exploiting yet another marginalized Indigenous community, basically fueled by this predatory capitalist agenda, that was an act of violence. And all of this fits under this whole system of colonialism, which is inherently rooted in the utter disempowerment of a people. So it's no wonder the Canadian state doesn't give a damn about Indigenous peoples, and it's no wonder industry doesn't give a damn about Indigenous peoples, because it's always been about taking our lands and taking our resources and erasing us as a people. But we're still here. So I just have like 2 minutes, I think, not even, maybe. And so I'm going to get to that part about what I learned. So as I mentioned, that core group of people who were organizing and trying to fight fracking from happening on the blood reserve, half of those people were white folks from the Council of Canadians. And what I've learned is that those people are important. Allies are important. Don't turn away help when you need it most. And also, allies, if you want to do something about climate justice, reach out to local Indigenous communities who are on the front lines of these land struggles. And obviously, we're not all born organizers, we're not all born leaders, so be humble and recognize your weaknesses, and reach out to those veteran organizers, reach out to elders, and ask for guidance, ask for help, because you need it. I mean, these industry folks are really, really suave. They know what they're doing because they've been doing this for a long time. And be good to each other. Lateral violence is so prevalent in our communities, and unfortunately it's very prevalent in this movement as well. So you're not always going to like the people you're working with, but think about the bigger picture. Getting arrested, that should be your last and final resort. You should do everything else possible before you find yourself in a jail cell. I mean, there's enough of our people incarcerated right now, and your energy is put to better use outside of a prison cell. And if you are going to set up a blockade, Indians love blockades. If you're going to set up a blockade, make sure you know what you're doing. Have a course of action. Speak to someone who knows the law beforehand. Know what you stand to be charged with if you're getting arrested. And have boundaries set. And make sure that you maintain peace and respect throughout that entire demonstration. And be prepared to talk to the media. Know who you're talking to. Know that media source and know what they tend to report on and the kind of stuff that they tend to produce. And know your talking points. You only have a couple of minutes for these interviews. And know that you don't have to answer every single question. And you don't even have to talk to media sources you're not comfortable talking to. That being said, there's so many incredible alternative media sources right now. And we need to utilize those media sources for our benefit. So media can also be your friend. And again, like I said, we're not all organizers. And it's important to go to the rallies, it's important to go to the marches, but we need to continue to be more creative in our efforts. I know that I'm not really an organizer. That's not what I do. My strength is storytelling, and my strength is working with film and video, and that's where I'm investing my energy in this movement, in the struggle for Indigenous self-determination, in the struggle for our land and resources. I'm investing that energy there, and I want to, challenge people in this movement to be more creative about what we're doing. It's about more than just going to the marches and the rallies and posting on Facebook and Twitter. It's about what you do on the streets, on the land. And I think that's it. That's all I have time for. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. Next we have Kanien'kehá, Kanien'kehá, and Arikara.
Thank you. Dosha, Marigua, Marishima Ishuya Het. So, hello, friends and relatives. My name is Eagle Woman. I am from North Dakota, Kanien'kehá and Arikara, and it's interesting. I was sitting here listening to Maya tell her story, and I was like, dang, that's so similar. Because of our tribal representation selling out our people. I am happy to announce that the person, Tex Hall, that was our current tribal councilman that did sign those, is not getting back in this next term. So. because I was ready to get arrested if that was going to happen. So I work with the Indigenous Environmental Network, a small nonprofit. You may have heard of us. We, as my coworker likes to say, we coined the term environmental justice. And I kind of want to talk about some of the injustices and some of the things that are happening in my community. I'm from an area in North Dakota where they're currently drilling for oil. They're using hydraulic fracturing, but what they're doing is they're digging out the oil, and the gas that's on top is currently a byproduct. So the natural gas that they're touting fracking as a great thing for is actually being flared into the atmosphere because the pipeline infrastructure does not exist, and it's not feasible for the oil companies to pay for that infrastructure. So this picture just shows you how big the Bakken Shale play is. That's what they call it, and I think that's just actually ridiculous. This just gives you an example of what some of the flares look like, but if you go to where I'm from, this is what you look at. Every single day, more than 100 million cubic feet of natural gas is flared away. Every day. Just to put it into perspective, that's enough energy to heat 500,000 homes going up into the atmosphere. So that's about as much carbon dioxide into the atmosphere as about 384,000 cars. So it doesn't make any sense, basically. And we don't, I don't know what you know about North Dakota, but we don't have a lot of cities there. And if you look at where I'm from space, this is a NASA photograph. It looks like a big old city out there in North Dakota. But that is actually gas flares from the natural gas. Those aren't cities at all. I mean, we've just got one stoplight in my community. So that just gives you an idea of, if you're on the ground looking around, what you might be looking at. My community is 1,500 people. It's called Newtown because we were displaced there when they flooded us out, when they built a dam, and they couldn't think of a better name. They just kept calling it the Newtown. And so I'm from Newtown. And this is our main street. This is what the truck traffic now looks like when you come into my community. And this is an area where, like, kids used to go for lunch. You know, we used to just walk from the high school right down to Main Street. They've had to shut that down because of fear of people getting struck and killed, because it's already happened. People have been killed by truck traffic there in my community. A lot of what we see is signs that say, you know, this kind of thing, road work ahead, and it's just trucks back and forth all day long because that is what they're currently using to get the oil out, to get the water that they need in, and then to take the contaminated water to an injection site and inject it where in the ground where they say it's going to stay forever. Of course, that's not true. Groundwater does move. We were driving, my sister and I, in a smaller community, and I noted this truck coming down the gravel road, and I was like, oh yeah, this is what's happening to our plants. There's dust pollution. People don't necessarily think of that, but we're actually seeing declines in the yields of our plants in an area where we have corn and canola and wheat that feeds the rest of the country. So our food systems are declining as well, which could also be attributed to the water that we're putting on that food, which is toxic. These are called VOCs, volatile organic compounds, and now what we're seeing in our communities when we look out into the buttes is smog and pollution. Just 5 years ago, it was crystal clear. It did not look like this, but this is what it looks like today. And the companies have so generously put up signs for us to let us know that H2S, hydrogen sulfide gas, may be present. And so you go by a sign and it's like, so do I just stop breathing right now, or thanks for the sign, but no thanks, get the heck off our land, you know? Seriously. This is right by my dad's house in a community called Twin Buttes, because a reservation is about 1 million acres, and it's broken into 5 different communities. And this is an area kind of near where my grandma used to go and fast. We can't even go there anymore. They have put these signs up now. It's authorized personnel only. Whoever they decide is authorized. Well, this particular one is Kodiak Oil and Gas, and so some of the local folks from home have actually signed contracts and keeping anybody out in areas that we used to go and use ceremoniously. Back to those wheat fields I was telling you all about, a lot of what we're seeing now is that it's zoned for industrial use only. A lot of the fields that used to be out there for food are now being set up and made available for oil and gas companies to come in. And it's just crazy. They've done everything possible that they can to make it easy for the gas companies to come in, as if they weren't gonna do anything we told them to. They want that oil. They want that oil, and they would have paid any price to get at it. And some of our people were duped into selling their land for as little as $34 an acre. And we're allotted, checkerboarded. I'll have to read a bit more about the Dawes Act to go into that, but some might own land here that's tribal, some might own land here that's non-native, and then there might be native-owned land, all right next to each other, right? All checkerboarded up on a reservation. So when one person sells out and another doesn't, they're still dealing with the pollution and the ramifications of somebody right next to them. And our tribe successfully changed a law in 1997 so that as long as 51% of the community decided to go ahead with this, the rest of the people had no say. So there are people that are in our fight, in our struggle right now at home that are receiving royalties that want nothing to do with it. So again, we're using that money and turning it into something positive and trying to use it to get our own 501c3 started and different nonprofits started at home, which is a really good thing. But what's happening, you can get a sense of what's happening just by reading the headlines. These are actual headlines from different papers in North Dakota that have come out just from our small reservation. Communities that never, ever saw anything like this. We have about 14,000 members total in the Kanien'kehá Rikara Nations. Only about 4,500 live on the reservation, and you know, I told a story before about how the worst thing we did when we were little kids is we used to run around egging our teachers' houses. I think I told this story before. I'm sorry to my teachers that are watching now. We kind of did that like at Halloween and stuff. So we were the enemy with our eggs, you know, running around. And now the enemy comes and they take our water right out of our areas where people are supposed to be filling their own cisterns. And there's flowback that is in these pipes. These trucks, these fracking trucks come up, this is in Twin Buttes, take the water out, the next person unknowingly comes up and fills up their water, and there's chemicals in there from that truck. Yet they get away with it because there's so many loopholes, not only in North Dakota alone, which is totally a fossil fuel state, but also then you get on the reservation and there's loopholes because our tribal council says, go ahead, go ahead. So when we've tried to reach out to the state and federal governments to help us, they say, you're a sovereign nation. All of a sudden we're sovereign because it's in their best interest to be sovereign. And they say, you elected them. Even if voter fraud exists and they got in by paying people off and changing votes, you deal with it. And they're getting the oil. Right in our communities, these trucks are driving down, and that frack water, which contains up to 500, well, actually up to 2,000 toxic chemicals. I mean, that could be the maximum. They're allowed to open their tanks and dump it right on the road. And we kept telling the EPA and different authorities that this was happening. And they were like, oh, okay, we'll take pictures. So we took pictures, and still nothing is being done. There were some truck drivers that were pulled over and by tribal police, and they were told they couldn't do nothing about it because of jurisdiction issues. They had to wait for a sheriff from an adjoining county to come and show up, and he just let them go. He was like, oh, I have a broken valve. I know that it's broken. And the whole time, the thing is just dumping out water. And so they just get away with it. And why not? I mean, they get fined $10,000 potentially if they do get fined. Not $10,000. It costs... how does it go? It costs $30,000 for them to go and take something and put it in an ejection site, but they only get fined $10,000 if they get caught. So they're like, do the math. Let's just dump this stuff wherever, right in the ditches. We've actually literally have ditches on fire at home before because of these things. And there have been pipeline breaks and there have been pipeline spills. This was the first official one near Lake Sakakawea, which is the reservoir. It's actually the Missouri River. And this wasn't discovered for quite a while. We don't know how much contamination went into the water. But they tell us we're protecting the water, and we have waste ponds that are protecting you. So I went and took some pictures of some of the waste pits. And I saw these little flags that are supposed to keep out I don't know what from falling in there. There's these little fences that aren't even put up, and that's just toxic water sitting in there, and they're hoping that it'll evaporate into the air. In some cases, they're actually spraying it so that it evaporates faster to get rid of it, because they don't know what to do with all of the toxic water that once they use for fracking can never be reintroduced into the system to be used. Never. But it is mixing with cleaner water. This is a spill that happened a few years ago, and it's still not being cleaned up. They bring earth movers in, and they take the dirt off the top layer. I don't know where they move it. They take the dirt and they dump it somewhere else, and then everybody's happy again. This farmer says that nothing is growing there still. It's just dead. It's like a red, greenish color. There was several gallons that spilled in this particular spill. The latest one was 1 million plus. Well, they reported that it was 1 million gallons, so you know darn well it was at least twice that amount, if not more. And this just gives you a perspective. People are trying to say that this happened in July of 2014, this spill, and they're trying to tell us that don't worry about Lake Sakakawea. The water's not going, the contaminated water didn't go there because there was beaver dams. Literally said, you can see the beaver dams here. I'm just gonna walk over here real quick. Occurred here. So this is dead vegetation all the way down into where we have a creek. But apparently that creek, which you can clearly see flows into the water, they put right in the reports, even the EPA, that nothing reached Lake Sakakawea. That's the Missouri River. And this is just one example of an incident of the oil wells that we're seeing all over the place. On top of that, they're blowing up. They keep saying that they're struck by lightning. There's been like 4 that have supposedly been struck by lightning. You can read these in the articles, and it's like, really? Geez, that Mother Nature is pretty powerful. You know, I don't think so. That's so messed up. And then people are just like, okay. You know, the ones that want to just ignorance is bliss, the ones that want to believe it, they're like, oh, that makes perfect sense. So give me my check, and I'll look the other way. But people are only going to be able to look the other way for a very short amount of time, because this is what our water at some point looks like. My sister was swimming in Lake Sakakawea, as we always did. We used to jump off the bridge and swim around, and we get our water out of this lake. We have, we saw this, and we're like, what the heck? She goes, I gotta go take some of this water. And she took it, and I was like, oh my God. So I took it to the North Dakota State Health Department. And then they said I didn't have enough. I had to have like 2 gallons. So I went back, got some more water, and then we're like, after all this stuff, after we paid a couple $100s out of pocket, they were like, oh, that's just a blue-green algae bloom. And I was like, okay, algae, it's a plant. Sounds kind of cool. I'm going to read about this. Oh, I read about it, and I was like, oh, it's toxic. You're not supposed to swim in it, and it kills fish and different stuff, and you're definitely not supposed to drink it. This was 1 mile downstream from a water intake plant. And now they're happening more and more and more frequently. And still, the current tribal council, because he's still in there, are turning the other cheek. Because they're getting very rich, lining their pockets. We don't know where over $384 million went. It's very, very, very corrupt. It blows my mind how corrupt it is. And everybody that wants to be in the good old boys club and scratch each other's backs is right in there helping each other out. Just to remind you now, up there in the red in the North Dakota part, that's Lake Sakakawea. That's our dam. Incidentally, all of the dams that you see are right on reservations, all the way down. All of our people were back flooded on these reservations. But I show this to show how the Missouri River runs all the way down to the ocean. So just because I'm in North Dakota doesn't mean that I'm the only one dealing with the toxicity. I also like to tell people, it's kind of like if a kid pees in a pool, and you're in the deep end and they're in the shallow end. You're not safe in the deep end. Because eventually when they keep on peeing, you're going to have pee in your end and you're going to come out smelling like it. Same thing with our air, same thing with our water. It's a cumulative thing that's building up and building up and building up, and we're all being impacted. We had another accident that happened near Bear Den in Mandaree. A semi actually wrecked and exploded. This is a common occurrence that we're starting to see in what, for me, used to be God's country. I'm very close to the land, too. It's a beautiful place. The western part of North Dakota is the Badlands, and it's very, very beautiful. And at the same time, not a lot of people live there, so it's very, very, very convenient for the industry because they're like, nobody's there, even though we're there. And we have people that have died. They've been run off the roads. My uncle and my brother were helping my cousin move, and they were driving to South Dakota. Actually, they were just going to leave the reservation, but before they could even get off the reservation, a semi truck barreled around a 90-degree turn, and so they hit the ditch. And this was the truck after they hit the ditch, and luckily they were okay. They just had to go. They had a couple bumps and scrapes, but they were okay. But they don't care about us. They don't care about the people. This picture shows the cemetery where we were burying my grandma, and just over the hill are all of the Frack chemical containers. All of the blue ones, you start to get the colors down. The round ones carry water, these ones carry oil. The blue ones are very dangerous. They carry all the fracking chemicals just over the hill from our cemetery. And like I said, my brother and my uncle were very lucky because they were able to escape with just a few cuts and bruises. We're not always all that lucky, and that's what really got me started to really fight fracking. Because back in 2008, I had a friend that was coming home from a nearby town. We're the kind of folks that have to go to town to get groceries. It's like an hour away. And she took her dad's truck, and she told her dad she was going to feel safer if she took his truck. So she was coming back home on Highway 23. It's a 2-lane road. And one of the semis was in a hurry because they make money based upon how much toxicity they spread around. And he was actually, when they looked at his logs, doing illegal hours. And he tried to pass her. And then a car was coming on. And so he zoomed back into his lane. He thought he was enough in front of her, but he clipped the front of her truck. And they both hit the ditch, and the semi landed on top of the cab of the truck. And so when we buried Cassie, there was a picture of her. And that's all. Because there wasn't anything left. And everything just continued to escalate. Thank you. Everything since then has actually gotten exponentially worse. And it blows my mind why companies can get away with these things. We're dealing with these radioactive frack socks that are off the charts on the Geiger counters. And again, they're supposed to pay to put these in specially located facilities, specially located dump grounds, even though those aren't safe either. So they don't in the reservation, they just dump them in the ditches. These were actually found by children. Yeah, some of them were playing with them because they were like, hey, we're catching bugs with our new nets. Radioactive frack socks. We're also dealing with man camps on a level that is unprecedented. We have thousands and thousands of people coming into the state of North Dakota, and North Dakota loves to talk about all these new jobs that the industry is creating, not going to our people, going to the flocks and floods of peoples from other countries. There's tons of people that, when I went home, I mean, I was like, what is going on here? I was at the casino and like half the people didn't speak English, the workers, because our own workers were out on the oil rigs, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what's going on, but there are people coming in and there are women being raped. There are babies being raped. Kids being found running away from a man camp. People being sold into sex slavery rings that are happening, drugs and alcohol. And how do these people that come into our communities and take these jobs repay us? In addition to raping and pillaging and killing, they leave kinds of derogatory remarks like this. You're welcome for all the things us white men paid you for, you dirty. You can read the rest. It's really hard to do this work when so many people are against you, because people in the community are like, hey, we're getting the money. And the tribal council's like, shh. And of course the state and federal government's like, we're staying out of it. But we do. We get together in our communities and we organize and we take back the power, because nobody's gonna do it for us. We actually had to boycott and protest. They tried to forcefully remove an entire trailer court of people to make room for the oil workers that needed to live there, because there was nowhere to live. And so we were able to have them pay, finally. They were just going to kick people out. They were like, bye, you're on your own. But we were able to have them create a new space where people could move that trailer court, where they could actually move their trailers to, and that they could live. There was oil, where there was water hookups. So we won that by speaking up and by saying something, but they weren't gonna in the beginning. They're like, just let it go. We also were able to stop a waste tailing site that was supposed to be built in a community called White Shield. There was no permit. It was like, if nobody would have ever said anything, that would have totally got built. But people started looking into it in our communities, and they were like, there's no permit, so it was stopped. And it's still stopped, thank God, today, right now. So the whole thing is, you're not guaranteed ever that you're going to win in this movement by sticking your neck out and making your voice heard. But you're definitely guaranteed 100% to completely fail if you don't at least try. And like the ladies have been saying, it's about the future. We can never, ever, ever give up hope for the future, because that is who we're fighting for. We're fighting for the now. We're fighting for the future. This is actually my niece standing next to me. And this was a few years ago. And now, this is Ayana. I'm totally going to give her the choice. But right now, she's my little future power shifter. This was when she was a couple months old. She's now 14 months old. She's back there somewhere. I don't know if she was waving at me earlier. She was blowing kisses and stuff. So I just want to end on a happy note and say that there are really good things still worth fighting for out there. There's a lot worth fighting for. And it makes me very warm in my heart to have all of you here, to see all of the ladies here that are fighting against all odds, because we know that as long as there's hope, there is a way forward for the future. So I want to say Matagadad. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Candy. Our last speaker is Shelley Young, Eskasoni First Nation.
Hello. Okay, I'm just going to get this started. So Gwenin Delvis is Shelley Young, Glewi Wewistonig. Wedabexi Mi'kma'ki. Mi'kma'ki is what people call is Atlantic Canada. That's where I'm from. And this is my community, Eskasoni. As you can see, most of our communities are right beside huge bodies of water. And the water to us, it's very sacred to us. We're deeply rooted to our water and our land. And when I say Mi'kma'ki, it includes Elsipogtog. Elsipogtog's in New Brunswick, and as you know, Elsipogtog has been fighting for their water and their territory for almost a year now, a little over a year now. This is another picture of Eskasoni. So beautiful. As Mi'kmaq people, our water is sacred to us as it embodies who we are. Our traditions are deeply rooted in the land and our water, and our communities live off the land and the water. It's our livelihood. We identify completely with the land, and we're deeply rooted to it. One thing, this is Elsipogtog. Elsipogtog is in New Brunswick, and as you know, SWIN, a Texas-based company, began seismic testing in and around Elsipogtog. And the people there said, once they learned more about fracking, they pretty much, all of us kind of got together and we started to look up fracking. As soon as Idle No More started, we were like, what's fracking? We didn't really know what it was. But we had to learn quick, and we had to become experts quick. Once we learned that it was going to destroy everything around us. So once they realized they were doing that around Elsipogtog, they thought, who in their right mind would allow this? They thought, there's no way we're going to allow this. So they stood up and they said, no, there's no way. So they started to call for support. They started calling for support. And so we got in our cars, and all of us went up to Elsipogtog to support. And this is some of the women, and it was led by Indigenous women, as most of Idle No More and all the Indigenous movements. And what really set this apart, this is an Elsipogtog on Treaty Day, was that our people, when we come together, we drum, we sing, we laugh, we keep it peaceful. And that's what some people didn't get. I remember the RCMP, they used to be over there. Sometimes there'd only be 10 of us there. Sometimes it'd be a lot of people. But even when there was 10 of us, there would be like 20 RCMP vehicles like circling us. And we were really nice to them, I remember. We were always going over and, chit-chatting. We were wondering, why are you guys here? We're not doing anything wrong. And they weren't allowing any media to come in. And I remember in the beginning, we were really happy for media. We were like, yeah, they're here, they care. And they'd come and they would interview some people. And right after the interview, we'd look it up and we'd see it. And they were really spinning and skewing everything that was happening there. So we decided, you know what, we're going to start our own media. So we said, let's stop talking to them. We didn't trust them anymore because they were making us look really bad. And they'd say sometimes we were being violent out there or being aggressive. And we were laughing and singing and drumming. And there was a sacred fire there. We were doing ceremony. They were always peaceful. And one thing that was really amazing is that fracking affects everybody. It's not just a native thing. So what we did is we brought allies in. We started to reach out to our allies. It's so important, like Maya said, to reach out to your allies. So we became a team, all of us working together. And we realized there were so many out there who cared about the cause. And so we brought them in, we started to meet up, and they stood with us, and right to the end. This is a sacred fire. this is actually not the sacred fire. They wouldn't take a picture of the sacred fire, but there's a sacred fire beside that, and there's always people circling each fire. And they would just sit around and say stories and try to uplift each other, because this standoff, it lasted a long time. Right here, the RCMP right away, I remember we started in May. In about June, they started arresting people, like unlawfully arresting people. Nobody was being violent, because the women and the elders were always telling us, no, you can't get violent, you have to be peaceful, no matter what they do. If they push you, don't push back. Everybody was constantly told we have to keep it peaceful. Right here, Sigawat, he's from Burn Church. He's one of the kindest people I know. He's a young man, and he used to take care of the sacred fire. And somebody always has to take care of the sacred fire. Oh, I'm sorry. If you can't hear me, I keep turning. And Sigawat was unlawfully arrested. He was never resisted arrest, but they threw him to the ground, and they were very, very violent with him. And this happened to many, many of our people. And people started to be afraid to go out there. This one lady, Sheila Joseph, she's from, this is actually on National Aboriginal Day. On National Aboriginal Day, people got together, we were happy, we were out there standing up for our land and our water. And Sheila's out there, and she's an elder, and she was punched by an RCMP for standing out there. And then her husband was also arrested for trying to help her. And on that day, I remember a pipe carrier was holding a pipe, and it's very sacred to us. And they arrested him, and they grabbed his pipe away from him. And they got away with it. Amy Sock, she's a lawyer and a mother. She was brutally assaulted by police at the October 17 raid. And they didn't know who she was. They treated her badly. She's the principal's wife also in the community. She's a very awesome, peaceful, loving lady. And she was out there with her drum, and while they were showing all these clips on TV for the world to see, what they were really showing was mainly a burning vehicle, all these burning vehicles trying to make us out to look really bad. There was so much going on there that you guys weren't seeing, you guys weren't getting, because they were only showing what corporations were telling them to air. And she was brutally assaulted, and she was charged as well. On that day, on October 17, this is one picture you probably didn't see, but we used, this is on my page, I shared a photo of Doris, Doris Copage. She's an amazing woman. She's an elder from Elzibukdug, and she cooks for everybody. She's just a loving, wonderful woman. And she was pepper sprayed here, and she had rosary beads on. And you see there's two police officers, RCMP, spraying her, and she's not doing anything wrong. She's just out there. So we used this, and one thing that was amazing is when we decided we're going to put this in our own hands and start to spread the message through social media and try to get the support we need, people shared. You see there's a lot of shares there. There was a lot of people coming, and there was a lot of support, and people were starting to stand up from all around Canada and the US, and we were so happy because we felt so isolated and alone. And I listened to these women, and I talked to other people here. It's very similar what we're all going through, so it was just amazing. It was also very scary, the whole ordeal. One thing that we've done a lot of different things through Lemoore, but we decided, you know what, let's try to make this fun also. It's really hard. It's a really tough work. You deal with a lot of lateral violence when you're doing this kind of work as well, as the girls have mentioned. So it's really important to keep our spirits up and to try to organize things as well to get us together in unity and to have some fun. So we threw a concert. We went to the UN, and we also threw an Elzibukdug. I organized the Elzibukdug benefit concert, and for all the warriors that were out there, a lot of our warriors are dealing with legal fees now. There's so many people who were arrested. So we decided to throw a benefit concert, and within 2 weeks, we pulled it together. We had all these performers. It was amazing. And we were able to raise money for them, but there are still so many of them who need our help. And right now, they're in court. They're fighting, and we don't know what to do. We're really stuck, we feel, because they're getting us with this law. Even though they weren't really doing anything wrong, they're out there. They're basically fighting for their basic right to water, clean water. And they're calling them extremists and terrorists. And they're out there just trying to protect their water and defend their land. And we also had round dances, of course. And here, right here, one of the men here was one of the two. There was a couple of men that were arrested, and they were detained right up until a week ago. So they were in there for a long time, a couple of weeks. It's been about 2 weeks. Aaron Francis is a young man. I'm in the center right there. He's on my right, I guess. And he was arrested, and he was in jail for a long time, and he was just a youth trying to stand up for his people, trying to do the right thing. And he was in there, and they didn't give him any rights to do his sacred medicines. He wasn't allowed to smudge. He wasn't allowed. They had to fight for everything, even making phone calls. And they were completely isolated. And one thing I have to mention is our missing women. We have 1,200 cases in Canada of missing and murdered women. Over 1,200 cases, and those are just reported cases. In Halifax, where I was living for a long time, Loretta Saunders, I don't know if you heard of Loretta Saunders, she was a Nook woman from Halifax. She's actually not from Halifax, from Newfoundland. But she was studying in Halifax. She was studying to do her MA, her master's in her thesis in Indigenous missing and murdered women. And she was newly pregnant, and she was really passionate about this. She was going around house to house and really, studying. She was really working hard because she wanted to make change. She wanted to do the kind of work we're all we're doing. And she really wanted to get to the bottom of why these women were going missing and nobody was taking it seriously. And, how could we change this? And Loretta, ironically, went missing while she was pregnant. And the RCMP didn't even call the mother. They didn't care. It was reported, and they kept saying, they were so worried about her. It was really unlike her, and they weren't making any phone calls. They didn't give. It was just another dead Indian to them. And Loretta, they ended up finding Loretta in a body bag, right off the highway. She was actually in a duffel bag. And she was young. She had so much aspiration. She was a genius. I read her thesis, and I was so amazed. And that's just one story. Imagine how many of our women go missing in Canada and the U.S., and nobody does anything about it. The RCMP don't do anything about it. I remember reading a newspaper article in Stephen Harper. There was an article saying, there's these police officers who are... There's a police officers who are attacking the women, he says, the First Nations women. What are you going to do about it? They asked him. He said, well, they're attacking them, and we're hearing that they're raping them. And Stephen Harper was getting challenged on that. And he said, why don't the Native women go see the police officers and report it? And it was like, that's our prime minister, Stephen Harper. And in New Brunswick, David Alward, he's the premier of New Brunswick, and ironically, the Minister of Aboriginal Affairs, he consistently pushes the oil and gas industry in the Maritimes. And he says, I see these commercials go up every half an hour now because of election time, and it says, shale gas, it's the way, jobs, prosperity. That's what they really push. They really push that on us, and we see it. When you see something over and over and over again, people are going to eventually start believing it. So often question people who stand against the fracking and educate people about the fracking, because we go school to school and we just try to educate everybody. We try to get allies, and we try to get being aware is so important, being educated about it. And then you see these commercials nonstop. They're always going. David Albert's his gas and oil and gas industry agenda commercials. And if you think about it, no money in the world is worth destroying our land and our water. I have a daughter as well. And as a mother, you look at your children, and I think with the whole movement, once I realized she has rights as a child to live in a clean environment, to do the things that we do in the woods. You know, our people are able to go hunting and fishing, and I think about her basic rights to clean water, and I think I would do anything to protect her environment, anything. And I think the people in Elsipogtog, we know that SWIN is coming back because they were just testing, and we know that they're coming back, and we really need support globally. And I know we all need support, but I pray that more of us can have the courage to stand up and speak out, even if it's uncomfortable. I know for myself, and I know the people of Elsipogtog and my brothers and sisters all around here, and specifically people in Mi'kma'ki, ism from there, is that we do not plan on stopping. It's difficult, it's hard work, it's uncomfortable, but we continue to push forward, and we don't plan on stopping and fighting until there's a ban in New Brunswick and right across Turtle Island, because that's what we need. If we're gonna survive, this is what we need. I wanted to talk about Annie here. Annie is the lady in the white. She's wearing a white, she's drumming, and she's a journalist. She was actually on the front lines in Elsipogtog. She's from Elsipogtog, and her son was the one who was arrested and detained right up until a few weeks ago. Well, Annie is also facing charges. She was on the front lines, and she worked really hard and to get the message out, and she just stood there. Like, she was just such a strong woman. Sorry, I don't know what I just did. I need my tech support. No, this is not mine. It's okay, I think it's totally X'd out. I think it's right. No, it's not. Here we go. Okay, so Annie right now is in court. She's fighting this. One thing that is really important in us supporting her, we're always trying to raise funds for them, for those of us who didn't get arrested yet. We try not to get arrested. And is that they're able to fight and get a lawyer and fight this, because that's how they stop us with their constitution, their laws. So a lot of people are afraid to go back out. Once they're banned from the area, a lot of people are afraid to go back out there, especially if they can't afford a lawyer and anybody to fight for them. So we try to support them. So Annie right now is in court, and she's a student right now, so she's having a hard time. And we wanted to ask if, I don't know if Clay was going to ask. Yeah, but we wanted to ask if you could help us with Annie in trying to raise some funds for her. I think that's their cue to get up there. Anyways, I want to thank you so much for listening to my story and our struggles in Canada. I know that a lot of people think that Canada, everybody's so nice and it's a utopia, and that we're all not. That it's when I hear like you're Canadian, eh? Like they get so excited when they see us, and they don't realize what we're going through. So I'm really glad that you guys are here to learn this real story of Canada and what we go through on a daily basis, every day. Thank you. Walalio.
We're going to have...
How do we send funds for Annie? Yeah, but for the people listening, is there a website you have?
There's these work.
So we're actually going to pass these two bowls around right now. So I'm going to pass these out, and if you want to make donations to Annie's case, we would love that. So I'm going to pass this microphone over to someone else who's going to introduce someone else. So quick commercial break. Sorry about that. So bowls. Yay.
And we're going to have a song, so Shireen Hoytland is going to introduce our singer.
Hello. It's a great honor to be able to introduce the singing act tonight. I live in the Gulf Coast on the Takapa Ishak land. And we have a lot of problems down there that are very similar to yours. We have fracking issues. We have bad mining practices that's opened a 27-acre hole. BP oil still invades our shores, and we have very many people sick. So I appreciate your words tonight. I do have one quick thing to say, and that is about all the foolishness of thinking that this economy is based on natural resource. This is unnatural resource taken and stolen from a natural source. Our natural resource is about to step out on this stage. She's a 13-year-old girl. That's where our power is, and that's where our future is as we pass off the baton of this fight. Takaya Blaney is a youth environmental leader from the coast of British Columbia who has traveled and spoken nationally and internationally. She's also a singer, songwriter, and an actress, and has produced an environmental CD, Shallow Waters, and a music video. She advocates for the protection of Indigenous traditional lands and from the threats of extractive industries. Please, a great round of applause for our beautiful little sister.
Hi. Hello. Okay. My name is Takaya Blaney. I'm 13 years old. I'm from the Sliammon Nation. First, I would like to acknowledge the Lenape people and their traditional territory of which we're standing on. I'm going to be singing a song, and it's called Earth Revolution. And it's derived from my passion of following being placed as a part of the sacred value of humanity, which is to be the caretakers and to be the stewards of our Mother Earth. And a lot of the work that I do as a human, and as I've heard it said earlier today, not as an activist, not as an environmentalist, not even dealing with Indigenous rights issues, because as I heard earlier today, something that really got to me is that to be an activist, and if we are environmentalists, simply by speaking our truth and trying to live a life that's holistic to the approach of medicine wheel of healthy living, the physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, and doing so and having environment as that balance, trying to leave a better future for the next generation. If to do so we are categorized as activists or environmentalists, then what does that say? So anyways, within my nation, I'm dealing with similar processes and the continued mechanisms of colonization that have been active since first contact from settlers. And what specific to my nation, what I'm seeing is the modern day treaty process between the government and the First Nations peoples. So a brief background is the Royal Proclamation of 1763 was one of the initial documents that first established and laid the foundation for Canada as a country. And in that, the legal jurisdictional rights of the Indigenous peoples, referred to as Indian peoples, those were recognized. And so we do have the natural right to exercise our sacred obligations as caretakers and stewards of the earth, and have that jurisdictional and political power over our traditional territory for the consultation, and have obligations by corporations and government to have consultation processes and processes where consent has to be given from the First Nations community, and that right is recognized unless a treaty has been signed selling that land to the government. And so that's a part of the modern day treaties. And so what I'm seeing in my nation is that treaty signing and that treaty process, which has been corrupted both on an internal and external level, looking at the government and corrupt chief and council to vote this treaty through. There's been deceased voters. And what we're really seeing is a blatant, conscious, genocidal attack on the Indigenous peoples. We're losing 97.7% of our traditional territory, the jurisdictional rights of that territory. We're losing 100% of our water rights, nationhood, from the effective date of this treaty. The First Nations, the Sliman First Nations, is terminated and obliterated off of the face of existence. As well, we stop becoming Indian peoples, of which all implemented Indigenous legal rights in Canada are attached, and we become Aboriginal. And that Aboriginal is derived from the Charter of Rights, of which we are stated as Aboriginal peoples of Canada. And Aboriginal, let me remind you, giving examples like abnormal and absent. It's not original. We become not original citizens of Canada. And so this cultural and overall and inevitably environmental degradation for this treaty is signed so corporations and governments don't have to go through any type of consultation processes before utilizing the land for industrial measures. This was done, it's not just a degradation of the water or the land or even the nation. On a personal level, that is like legally taking that cultural pride out of my bloodlines, who I am as a Sliman person, and saying you don't exist anymore. So it's I used to get, I still do, but I used to get very emotional when it came to talking about this, but I have come to a realization that there is, if our ancestors saw what was happening right now, I know that they would be crying, but I also know that there is a time for grief, and there is a time for prayers, and there's a time for healing and strength and strong prayers and actions, and overall to use your voice. And because we've been given that voice for a reason. So, you know, it's very important to work with our youth, understand what we're for on a communal basis, and trying to support different diverse areas of our cultural communities. Because if we're building our entire if we're having the foundation of the activism movements be on what we are against, then it's only sustainable on hatred and anger. We need this to be sustainable on love and our collective vision for the future. So we want to look at establishing, programs and empowering our youth to be cultural ambassadors of their environment, with arts empowering youth ambassadors with tools to come into their own creative expression with their music and arts, to tap into their culture, and infusing that cultural knowledge, that knowledge that comes with the language, those respectful philosophies, to these children, so they can understand how to be leaders, because that day will come. The unraveling of the prophecy of the seventh generation, that day will come, and it's not only the question of what land we will leave for our children, but what children will we leave for our land. So, in context of that statement, I would like to share a song called Earth Revolution that refers to this current generation as Generation Now, the generation that will change things. Oh, yeah. Okay. Out from a distance, still got 1,000,000 miles to go, making a difference. The only trophy I want to hold, the state of the nations. It's poison from pollution, greed and war. No, we have solutions, but actions speak louder than words. Oh, stop waiting till tomorrow. Oh, stop living yesterday. 'Cause there won't be tomorrow if we don't change today. Generation now, children of the future, Earth revolution. Creation's crying out and I feel her pain. I can't walk away. So I will do my part to fix what's broken, give back what we're taking, all for the dawn of a new day. Calling out to each and every person, join me in the Earth revolution. Let's go the distance. We are 1,000,000 voices strong, facing resistance. But there's a choice between right and wrong. Oh, stop waiting till tomorrow. Oh, stop living yesterday. Oh, 'cause there won't be tomorrow if we don't change today. We're generation now, children of the future, Earth revolution. Creation's crying out and I feel her pain.
calling out to each and every person, join me in the earth revolution. I've walked this great land, it used to be beautiful, it used to be home. I've seen the river run dry, now communities have no hope. Where are the tall ancient trees? They replaced them with their concrete dreams. We are turn this around. We can fix it right now. We're generation now, children of the future, earth revolution. Creation's crying out, I feel her pain, I can't walk away. So I will do my part to fix what's broken, give back what we're taking, hope for the dawn of a new day. Calling out to each and every person, join me in the earth revolution. I'm calling out to every generation, join me in earth revolution. I'm calling out to each and every nation, join me in the earth revolution. Thank you. Thanks. Okay, I'm getting the hook off stage. Anyways, so just very quickly, I would just like to share some information that I received from my family in support of the work of advocacy and promotion of the environment and the integrity of our environment. And prior to choosing this path, my family told me that you have a voice be heard, and in our culture, you can hear that Creator, He has given you a voice, everyone a voice for a reason. This mechanism of communication, speaking, singing, to speak for those who have no voice and to speak for those whose voice goes unheard. And you have a gift and you have a passion. And you have to use that gift and use that passion in good ways, in prayer and good thoughts. And we have a responsibility because we all drink water. It doesn't matter your race, your religion, your wealth, where you are. We all drink from the same worldwide well. And we have to recognize that as sacred. We all breathe the air. It goes through all of our lungs, through the lungs of the trees, through the lungs of the plants, and from that moment, we are together because we share the same future, we share the same destiny. And we all walk upon this foundation of Mother Earth. We are all her children, so let's work together. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that was a great way to end the night here. Unfortunately, we won't have time for questions and answers. We've run a little bit over and the room needs to be used, so if everybody could leave afterwards. But I just wanted to once again thank all of you for coming out. Let's give a warm round of applause for all of our panelists. Please go to Idle No More to find out more of what you can do to help each of these women in the work that they're doing in their lands. Also, please go and check out the tables. You can sign up for more information there. Get stickers, get also signs for tomorrow in the streets. We have signs that you can carry. And go to Frack Action to find out what you can do on Tuesday or Wednesday when President Obama is speaking. We're organizing an emergency rally outside of the United Nations to demand that he ban fracking and not take the world stage to promote it. Thank you once again, everyone, for coming tonight.